On April 3, 2004, 23-year-old Alonzo Brooks attended a party in La Cygne, Kansas. He was happy and enjoying the evening with his friends. But as the night progressed, tensions rose and a fight broke out. Eventually, Alonzo decided to leave. Along the way, his friend took a moment to have a cigarette and asked another friend to make sure Alonzo got home safely. Later, when he called to check on him, he was shocked to discover that Alonzo was missing. No one had seen him leave, and no one knew where he had gone. What happened to Alonzo after the party? Where did he go? Welcome to Bad Things. Today we'll talk about the mystery of Alonzo Brooks, explore possible theories to find out what most likely happened that night. Alonzo Tyree Brooks was born on May 19, 1980 in Topeka, Kansas, to his parents Billy Brooks Sr. and Maria Ramirez. Alonzo was the youngest of 5 children, with 3 older sisters, Demetria, Felicia, and Esperanza, and an older brother, Billy Jr. Alonzo was especially close to his brother Billy Jr. and had a large group of friends and family who loved him. Most people called him Zoe, which was his nickname. When Alonzo was a little older, his mom married Stuart Porter, who became his stepfather. Stuart had his own kids, and Alonzo got along great with his new step-siblings. Everyone in the family, whether by blood or marriage, loved each other, and Alonzo was known for being easygoing and friendly. He never caused trouble and got along with just about everyone. Zoe was known for being a kind, friendly person. He loved being with people and making new friends. His family describes him as always sweet and caring. Among his many friends, Zoe had one best friend he considered a brother, Rodney English. They grew up together and were inseparable, spending their childhood running around outside, building bike ramps and playing games. One of their favorite activities was playing King of the Hill on top of the compost pile. They would try to knock each other down to be the first to reach the top. Alonzo was also a natural athlete. He loved sports, especially football, and many of his teammates became his best friends. He also enjoyed basketball and karate. Like many youngest siblings, Alonzo sometimes felt left out when his older siblings did things he couldn't. But his mom always made sure to give him extra love and attention, even if he couldn't always keep up with the older kids. His brother Billy thought their mom coddled him too much, especially when she stepped in to stop their roughhousing, but she just wanted to protect him. When he was a teenager, Zoe was polite and cared about how he looked. His sisters would joke about him ironing his pants before wearing them. He loved wearing red and black clothes, and he was often seen wearing a beanie. After graduating from Topeka High School, Alonzo and his mom moved to Gardner, Kansas. Gardner was much smaller and more rural than Topeka, with a population of just over 13,000, compared to Topeka's 125,000. The move was a big change for Alonzo, but he adjusted and found a job working for his stepdad's maintenance company. Although it was a big transition, Alonzo began to think about a new dream, becoming a farmer one day, living on some land and raising animals. He loved the idea of that peaceful country lifestyle. In Gardner, Alonzo also made a group of close friends. On weekends, they would get together for parties and small gatherings. Life in Gardner was different, but Alonzo found happiness in his new life, surrounded by family, friends, and the possibility of a future he could be proud of. On Saturday, April 3, 2004, one of Alonzo's friends heard about a party happening in a town nearby. The party was a send-off for a guy who was heading into the military, and people from several different towns were going to be there. Moreover, the town had a history of racism, and Alonzo would be one of only a few black people at the party. Some say he was the only black person there. Others believe there were a few more, but the situation felt off because of the town's reputation. Alonzo wasn't a big party-goer, but he decided to have a fun time at this one. His friends met at his house to plan the trip, and Alonzo was pumped. He dressed in jeans, a t-shirt, a sweater, and his favorite skull hat with boots that he wore often. Since he had an injured ankle from playing basketball, he had a slight limp and had rolled down one of his socks to help support it. Before leaving, Alonzo gave his mom a hug and a kiss and told her he'd be back later. He drove to the party with his friend Justin, and the rest of the group followed in another car. The party was nearly 50 miles away, at a farmhouse outside of La Signa, a small town with fewer than 1,000 people. The drive was through strange, unfamiliar county roads, leading them far from the usual places they visited. When they arrived, they noticed a long driveway leading to the house, which was surrounded by fields and woods. There was also a small creek called Middle Creek running nearby. As they approached the house, a few people were standing outside drinking. Alonzo walked up and broke the ice by saying, "Who wants a beer?" This was unusual for Alonzo, who was usually shy and reserved, but that night he seemed in a great mood and ready to join in the fun. After a while, the rest of Alonzo's friends arrived, and they realized they were likely the only ones from Gardner at the party. Most of the other people there seemed to be locals from nearby farms, dressed in cowboy hats and boots. It wasn't exactly Zoe's usual crowd, but he got along with everyone, and that night he was determined to enjoy himself. The party was full of music, dancing, and drinking games like flip cup and card games. Alonzo was probably one of the oldest people there, at 23, while most of the guests were teenagers around 16 or 17. Some people at the party were smoking weed, and Alonzo decided to join in. He started playing a drinking game as soon as he got there. His friends noticed that he seemed to be having an especially great time that night. One of his friends, Daniel Fune, found Alonzo in the kitchen and they took a few shots together. Afterward, Daniel left to talk to someone else, but when he came back, he saw Alonzo in the middle of a heated argument with another guy. They weren't physically fighting, but they were shouting at each other. It looked like things might get physical, so Daniel stepped in to break it up. After some time, Daniel and another friend decided to leave for a different party. They said goodbye to Alonzo, and Justin stayed behind with him. The plan was for Justin to drive Alonzo home later. Around 1 a.m., Justin realized he was out of cigarettes, so he told Alonzo he was going to grab a pack and would be right back. Alonzo asked him to pick up a pack for him too. Justin left the party, and instead of turning left to head back to town, he accidentally turned right. He ended up lost on a gravel road far from the farmhouse. He was stuck for about 30 minutes before he realized he had no idea where he was. He called another friend at the party and asked if they could take Alonzo home. Over the phone, Justin could hear Alonzo joking around in the background, making fun of him for getting lost. Justin thought it would be easier to just go straight home rather than going back to the party to get Alonzo. He decided that was the best move, even though it wasn't the smartest one. He would soon see why he should have stuck to the buddy system, which is so important at parties, especially in unfamiliar places. The next morning, on Sunday, April 4th, Alonzo's mother, Maria, got a call from one of Alonzo's friends asking if he had made it home. She was surprised by the question because she figured her son was already in bed, as usual. Alonzo always came home after a night out, and if something kept him from coming home, he would let her know. He never spent the night at anyone's house. He always went home to sleep in his own bed. When Maria went into Alonzo's room, she saw that his bed was still made. He hadn't been there at all. She called out for him, thinking he might be in the basement, but there was no answer. She realized he wasn't home. She told his friend to call all the others who had been at the party and ask if they knew where Alonzo was. From the very start, Maria was scared. This wasn't like Alonzo at all. She knew something was wrong. He would never not come home without calling. That morning, Alonzo's friends were also waking up to frantic calls asking if they had seen him or if they knew where he was. No one had seen Alonzo since the night before. His friends all agreed. It was unlike him to not come home or call his mom. Something was definitely wrong. So Justin called the friend who was supposed to take Alonzo home from the party. The friend explained that somehow they had missed each other at the end of the night. He thought Alonzo had already left with someone else, but he wasn't sure. Meanwhile, Maria, Alonzo's mom, decided to call Alonzo's lifelong best friend, Rodney. Rodney was worried as soon as he heard, even though he didn't know any of Alonzo's friends from Gardner. He immediately dropped everything to help. Justin drove Rodney and a few other friends to the farmhouse where the party had been. When they arrived, Rodney was surprised at how far away it was. As they walked around the property, they felt a sense of unease, but they continued searching, hoping to find any sign of Alonzo. They crossed the road to a wooded area and soon found one of Alonzo's boots and his skull hat lying in the open. They kept looking and found the other boot near the creek. Rodney immediately thought it looked like someone had thrown the boots out of a car window while driving down the road. Just after they found the second boot, a man they didn't know rode up on a four-wheeler and told them to leave. The group felt a wave of fear. Alonzo's friends wanted to stay and confront the man, but Rodney, who was the only black person in the group, felt uneasy. He knew the area was known for racism, and he wanted to leave to stay safe. "We're not naive," Rodney said, explaining that his family had faced racial issues before. This experience made Alonzo's friends realize how big a mistake it was to leave him at the party. Rodney felt frustrated with Justin for leaving without Alonzo. Justin felt terrible, but he thought everything seemed fine when he left. He figured he'd be back soon, but he now realized how important it was to stick with friends at unfamiliar parties. Rodney and the others reported what they found to Maria, telling her about the boots and the man who had told them to leave. Maria immediately went to the police, but they told her she had to wait 48 hours to report Alonzo as missing because he was an adult. Maria didn't believe that. She knew something was wrong. That night, she called Alonzo's siblings, panicking and unsure of what to do. Zoe's brother Billy promised to go to La Signa the next morning to find out more. Billy and his wife Cindy found out that the farmhouse was a rental property, so they decided to go check it out themselves. When they arrived, they got out of the car and walked down the long driveway. They looked inside the windows and realized the house was mostly empty. Something about it didn't feel right. Maria was shocked when she saw the farmhouse where the party had been just a few nights earlier. It looked like no one had been there at all. As they drove through the small town, they noticed the white residents giving them angry looks. They soon met with the sheriff, but he didn't seem concerned. He told them that Alonzo was probably just walking around the area, as if people often just walked around for days without a care. This didn't make sense at all, especially since they had already found Alonzo's boots, so he couldn't have been walking around barefoot. Feeling frustrated, Maria and the others hoped the sheriff would take the situation seriously. Investigation. The sheriff sent Deputy Paul Fear to investigate the property where Alonzo had been last seen. Paul searched the farmhouse, the creek, and the area around it, but found no sign of Alonzo. He reported back saying there was no contact or evidence of him. Soon after, the case was handed over to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, who quickly began an intensive search. They brought in helicopters, evidence recovery teams, and cadaver dogs to search the fields and woods along the creek. But even with all these resources, they couldn't find any trace of Alonzo. On April 10th, just days after Alonzo went missing, the FBI got involved. They suspected that Alonzo may have been targeted because of his race, as he was one of the few black people at a mostly white party. The media began reporting this as a potential hate crime. People at the party had called Alonzo racial slurs, and both Alonzo's mother and the FBI believed he was a victim of racism. However, many people from La Signa didn't like the media's portrayal of their town. They argued that there were people from other towns at the party too, and that La Signa wasn't a racist place. But investigators were still concerned, knowing the town's history. They warned Alonzo's family to avoid La Signa and to stay safe. Since the family couldn't help with the official search, they decided to make t-shirts and flyers with Alonzo's picture and the words, "Lost but not forgotten." Eventually, a volunteer rescue team was brought in. They were experts in underwater forensics, using high-tech equipment to search the area. The family felt hopeful that they would find Alonzo's body if it was in the water. However, after searching the creek, they found it to be shallow, no deeper than 3 feet, and clear enough to see the bottom. The divers thoroughly searched the creek and its banks, but found no sign of Alonzo. They reported their findings to the police, but were never called back to search again. The investigation into Alonzo's disappearance was eventually closed. In total, law enforcement conducted 6 searches of the farmhouse, the creek, and the surrounding property. Over 40 people were involved, searching shoulder to shoulder, going over every inch of the area. At the same time, the KBI and FBI conducted numerous interviews with people who had attended the party. Some witnesses agreed to take polygraph tests, but many refused. Zoe's family kept hearing rumors about a fight around 3 or 4 in the morning after all of Alonzo's friends had left, but the details were unclear. Alonzo's friends met with investigators many times, sharing everything they remembered from that night, hoping to find answers. Alonzo's family kept pushing for answers, giving investigators more names and phone numbers of people who might know something. But over and over, they were told the same thing, that Alonzo had probably gotten drunk, kicked off his shoes and tried to walk home, maybe getting lost along the way. This didn't make sense to his friends. Justin especially kept insisting that Alonzo wouldn't have walked home without his shoes, especially with a hurt ankle. He had his sock rolled up to support it, so why would he take off his shoes? But no matter how much his friends argued, the investigators seemed stuck on the idea that there was no foul play involved. For 3 weeks, Alonzo's family called the Lynn County Sheriff's Office every day, asking for updates and trying to join the search. But the investigators told them to stop calling. They were told, "We'll contact you when we know something." Finally, almost a month later, on May 1st, 2004, the family was allowed to search the property by themselves. By then, Alonzo had been missing for nearly a month, and they didn't expect to find him. They just hoped to find any evidence, something that could give them more information. They gathered more than 50 friends and community volunteers, putting on orange vests, and began searching the property and the creek behind the house. One group was led by a volunteer named Karen Turner. She decided to check an area around a shed. As her group cleared thick brush near the creek, they reached the edge of a ravine. Suddenly, Karen saw something. It was Alonzo, lying there in the water. At first, it looked like he was asleep, but they quickly realized he wasn't. They were shocked to find his body on the property, especially since no one had discovered it before. Karen used the radio to alert Alonzo's uncle, Edward, and then told Billy, Alonzo's brother, that they had found his body. Billy rushed to the scene. When he got there, he said it took everything in him not to rush over and grab Alonzo, but they knew they had to leave everything untouched for the investigation. They immediately knew something horrible had happened. It didn't make sense that Alonzo's body had been missed during previous searches, with rescue teams, cadaver dogs, and helicopters all looking for him. The family believed someone must have heard that they were finally allowed to search, and then moved Alonzo's body to where they would eventually find it. As soon as they reported the discovery, law enforcement arrived at the scene. Alonzo's body was sent to Shawnee County, where Dr. Eric Mitchell, an experienced pathologist, performed the autopsy. He found no obvious signs of injury, no gunshot wounds, stab wounds, or fractures. There were no signs of drowning either, though Dr. Mitchell noted that it was hard to say for sure if Alonzo had been strangled because the soft tissue around his neck had already decomposed. He also found that animals had eaten parts of his body, making it harder to tell how he had died. There was no water in his lungs, but that didn't rule out drowning. The pathologist couldn't determine the exact cause of death, and so Alonzo's death was ruled as undetermined. After the autopsy, something very strange happened. The sheriff in the area first said he thought Alonzo had been murdered, but just a few days later he changed his mind and started calling it a death investigation. When asked how Alonzo's body ended up in the creek, even though it had been searched several times, the sheriff suggested that the body could have moved down the creek over time, possibly getting stuck in trees or a dam. But Alonzo's friends and family didn't believe that explanation. They thought someone moved his body into the creek right before they were allowed to search. Theory number 1. Murder, hate crime. Alonzo's family firmly believes that he was murdered. They say they know it in their hearts. They talked to the leader of the dive team who searched the creek, and he confirmed there was no way his body was there during earlier searches. Some investigators think his body could have been stuck in the ravine and was carried downstream as the water level rose, but this doesn't explain why his belongings like his wallet, movie card and bandana were found on him and were completely undamaged. Alonzo's family and friends think someone purposely moved his body to the creek right before they were finally allowed to search the area. They believe this was done to make it seem like the body had been there all along, even though it wasn't found in the earlier searches. The family is convinced that someone was hiding Alonzo's body and only moved it when they knew the search was about to happen. Brooks' mother, Maria Ramirez, said, "I'm Mexican and his father is black, so he's mixed. They didn't just target one race or kill one race, they killed two. He was targeted because of the color of his skin." Theories suggest that maybe Alonzo tried to walk home at the end of the night. This doesn't explain why he would have taken off his shoes, but some believe that maybe someone picked him up along the way. Some people think he might have just crossed paths with a random killer, but that seems unlikely. Alonzo's brother believes that Alonzo was likely kept in a meat locker or another cold place, which would explain why his body looked well preserved when they found him. But there was no way to know exactly when Alonzo died, and some believe that his body had been hidden in the creek for almost 30 days. Others think that Alonzo was kept alive somewhere before he was killed, or that his body was stored and then placed in the creek later. Dr. Eric Mitchell, the pathologist who examined Alonzo's body, said it seemed unlikely that anyone would have moved his body out to the creek. When people hide bodies, they usually try to make it as easy as possible. It would have been hard to carry Alonzo through thick brush and get him to the creek. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Maybe a group of people did move him. Theory number 2. Accidental death. Some people believe Alonzo's death might have been an accident. Maybe he drank too much, wandered off, got lost, and ended up getting hurt. However, this theory doesn't make sense because if he had gotten lost or injured, they would have found some trace of him earlier. Plus, how do you explain his shoes being thrown out of a car on the side of the road? His family doesn't believe this explanation. Theory number 3. Drug overdose. Another theory is that Alonzo may have been given drugs at the party, leading to an overdose. Some believe that the person who gave him the drugs might have panicked and hidden his body. While this theory is possible, there isn't enough evidence to support it. Theory number 4. Murder over jealousy. There's also a theory that Alonzo was murdered because of a personal conflict. Some witnesses said Alonzo was spending time with a young white woman at the party, and some people think that someone didn't like seeing him with her and might have got jealous. This could have led to a fight and maybe even murder. Alonzo's friends believe that if he had been attacked, he would have fought back. But some people think the murder could have been planned from the start. The mystery of how Alonzo died and where his body was until May 1st remains unsolved. With no solid evidence of a hate crime, the FBI left the case, and the family was left with more questions than answers. Rumors and speculations continue to spread, with people all over the internet sharing different versions of what might have happened. Some say he was dragged by a truck. Others claim he was beaten to death. All of these theories makes it even harder for the family to find peace. After Alonzo's body was found, His family was able to give him a proper burial at Mount Calvary Cemetery in Topeka, but the pain of not knowing what happened to him stayed with them. His mom Maria is heartbroken and paranoid about her other children's safety. Justin is haunted by the guilt of leaving Alonzo that night. He believes that if he hadn't left, Alonzo would still be alive. In March 2019, the family was shocked when the Kansas Bureau of Investigation officially closed the case. They couldn't understand how the case could be closed with so many unanswered questions. Thankfully, Netflix was working on a reboot of Unsolved Mysteries and decided to feature Alonzo's case. This brought new attention to the case, and the FBI reopened it in April 2019. After the case was reopened, the FBI started investigating the possibility of a hate crime. They've continued to interview witnesses and review evidence to piece together what happened at the party. In June 2020, the FBI announced a $100,000 reward for anyone who could provide information that could help solve the case. The evidence suggests that Alonzo was the victim of a hate crime. New details have come to light that suggest on the night of the party there was a racially charged fight. During the party, several fights broke out, with some even being described as brawls. Many attendees also mentioned hearing racist comments. These developments have led investigators to believe that the violence Alonzo experienced might have been related to his race. On July 1, 2020, the Netflix show Unsolved Mysteries aired an episode about Alonzo's case. His family gathered together for a watch party, hoping this new attention might finally bring answers. With many people now aware of what happened, they were filled with both hope and frustration, waiting for someone to come forward with helpful information. One family member shared, "I hope this lets people know that we want answers and need them now." The episode sparked several tips, and some were credible enough for the FBI to investigate further. In an interview for the Unsolved Mysteries episode, Justin shared his belief that the fight at the party may have been fueled by racial tensions. In July 2020, the FBI made a key announcement. They had gathered enough evidence to exhume Alonzo's body. Exhuming a body is a significant step, typically only done when new, crucial information comes to light. Alonzo's body was transported to Dover Air Force Base, where forensic experts could conduct new tests using advanced DNA technology not available in 2004. The forensic team's examination confirmed what investigators had suspected all along. Alonzo had been murdered. The injuries on his body didn't match the usual signs of decomposition, and on April 5, 2021, the cause of death was officially changed to homicide. This was a major breakthrough for Alonzo's family, who had long believed he was murdered. Brooks's mom, Maria Ramirez, attributes her recent cancer diagnosis to the stress and sorrow she's experienced. "There's days when I just can't take it," she said. "When I think real hard about, what happened, and then I think of what they did to my son, it really gets to me." But she's also just glad the case is still getting attention, and that people are keeping her son's memory alive. "I got this feeling that it's going to come out. I got a feeling it's going to come out soon, and I'm not giving up hope about that," Ramirez said. "It's eating at those people, whoever did it to my son, and I know their life is not good. After all these years, there is hope that one day they will discover the full truth about what happened to Alonzo and who was responsible."